Hello there. So, as you know, 2022 marks the 50th anniversary of the foundation of the Roland Corporation. Here's a photo of them back in the day. And there's lots of things been going on this year. There's a brilliant section on the Roland website. They did some limited edition golden Jupiter X's. You just saw me playing one. Unfortunately, those aren't for sale. I did try to steal it unsuccessfully. Maybe next time. And also, this brilliant book, Inspire the Music, 50 Years of Roland History, produced by Bux. And I had the great pleasure and privilege of contributing to some of the sections of this book. I say some because, my goodness, is this comprehensive. There's nearly 400 pages of Roland history in there. And that got me thinking, with a company as prolific as Roland, we all have our own Roland stories. And I thought it would be fun to tell you some of mine. And I'd love to hear yours too in the comment section. So my first Roland story involves this guy, the Juno-6. Now, going back quite a few years now, I was the music producer on a job where we had a series of commercials, TV, radio and online, that were all spoofs of the 1980s. And the creative team, the director and the client were interested in creating scores for these ads that were as authentically 80s sounding as possible and as serious sounding as possible, because they thought it'd be funnier if the ads were just completely over the top, but the music was really serious. It was funnier than if the music was silly as well. Now, I was tasked with finding a bunch of vintage gear to use for this job so that we could get as authentic a sound as possible, which was not a big deal at the time because most vintage gear was really inexpensive at the time. Especially if you were willing to look a little bit further afield. And I got some synths, some drum machines, some samplers, and amongst that was a Juno-6. And this was for sale in a village in the middle of nowhere, but you had to go and get it. And it was a price that would now make you cry. And as luck would have it, a friend of mine was living on a boat about an hour away from this village, and I paid him and he went and got it for me, which worked out because a few weeks later I was going on holiday with him. So he brought it with him. And in the place we were staying, I didn't have anywhere to put it and it wasn't in a case. So I put it on the side in the kitchen. And there was some headphones plugged in the back. And all week, every time someone walked past it, they were putting on the headphones and everyone was playing with this communal Juno. And it got nicknamed the kitchen synth. And that has now become an ongoing joke. Whereas if I can drag a synthesizer to my kitchen at home, I will do to take a picture, and I've got a whole album of photos called The Kitchen Synth. Maybe I should do a little coffee table book at some point. But the original kitchen synth was this, the Juno-6. So next we're going to talk about this monstrosity, the System 100M. There are about 20 different stories as to where all this came from, but I'm just going to tell you two. So there are 13 production modules for the System 100M, and I'd found 10 of them, But the final three, the 173, the 174, and the 165, are incredibly difficult to find. And the reason is because they put them into production right at the end of the lifespan of the System 100M and then almost immediately discontinued it. So they made far fewer of those than they did all the other modules. Now, I'd kind of resigned myself to the fact that I may never find them. But then something rather incredible happened. A guy was on holiday on the other side of the planet and was walking through a shopping mall. And in the window of a shop, this is absolutely true, he saw a stash of System 100M modules, including those three. Unbelievable. He took a photo of this and put it on the internet, and a guy saw it, and I can't remember if he was a friend of the guy who was on holiday or he just by fluke happened to see this photo. And he managed to figure out where this shop was, managed to get in touch with them, and thankfully they spoke English and were really lovely. And he said, is there any way I could buy one of these modules? And they said, sure. And he bought it, and it was shipped over to him, and it was the genuine real deal. And so I will forever be grateful to him. He got in touch with me. We had spoken before about the System 100M, and he said, you've got to speak to these guys. And I got in touch with them, and they were lovely, and they sent me some photos of these modules proving that they did have them. And I said, can I buy them? And they said, sure. And so I bought them, and they turned up, and they are in immaculate condition. It must have been the only stash of them left in the world. And it's one of those things that sounds so ridiculous and so, totally too good to be true, but it actually genuinely happened. Now, the second story. So, Chris Carter of Throbbing Gristle and Chris and Cozy, who was a famous System 100M user, wrote what was even then a retrospective on the 100M in Sound on Sound magazine in 1995. And in that article, he says he has some paperwork or something that mentions the existence of 5 further modules beyond the 13 production modules. And he lists them, but he says he's never seen them or heard of them out in the wild, and if anybody knows anything about them, to get in touch. And that's pretty much how it was left from 1995 onwards. In the 2010s, thanks to very niche groups on the internet, sure enough, examples of 2 of these modules came out of the woodwork. And they matched Chris Carter's description, and so his information was correct. They did make 5 more. Whether they were prototypes or a limited production run, it's difficult to know. But it then gave hope that perhaps we could find the other 3 of those 5. Fast forward to 2022, this year, fittingly the 50th anniversary of the foundation of the Roland Corporation, I got another tip-off from somebody who had spotted a box, not even a cab, a box of System 100M bits. It was junk. It was in very bad condition. Everything was completely gunked up and filthy, needed complete restoration, and it wouldn't be worth your while, apart from that one of these modules was one of the outstanding prototypes. Bing! The 141 dual envelope gate delay inverter adder module, the only one that has ever been found, and we managed to get hold of it. Now, this module doesn't have a serial number. It's just got a handwritten 141 on the back. It's also got slightly different circuit boards to the production modules, and it's got these white slider caps. And I thought that was because they were faded, but when you take them off, they're white on the back as well. And in fact, one of the other prototype modules I've seen photos of also has those white slider caps. Furthermore, the modules that it came with did have serial numbers on them. And if you don't know this, you can date Roland products from the serial numbers. And those modules came out as October of 1978, which is prior to the System 100M even being released. So this points to this being an early prototype module that was in circulation before the 100M was released. And because the functions on it are found in other production modules, and they're much more advanced, I think this was a stepping stone from the System 700 to the System 100M. So what that means is that my System 100M is completely unique. As far as we know, that's the only 141 that exists. How and why it wound up in a box that emerged 44 years after it was, rumoured to exist, I would love to know. Maybe we'll never know, but it means that I am a custodian of this because it's very, very important. And, I will always cherish and use and love this system and try and keep it going as long as possible. So my next Roland story, very different. This classic, the TB-303. Now, like 909s and 808s, 303s had been famous for a long time, and as such were much more expensive than other vintage gear, although still a fraction of the prices they are today. And I was after one, and I was watching various local adverts, and I saw one come up for what was close to what I could afford. And I made an offer that was a little bit lower, and the guy politely declined, and he had a buyer at the asking price, so fair enough. Now, it turned out the person who was buying it was actually a scammer and was trying to, I can't remember, either pay a different price or was trying to steal it out of the owner's hands without paying anything at all. It wasn't very nice anyway. And so the owner wound up back at square one, and he needed to sell it because he needed the cash. And out of the blue, I got a message again, having kind of forgotten about it, and said, "Am I still interested?" And I said, "Absolutely, I am." And he said, "Look, I need to sell it. I need the cash. Can I bring it to you on the train?" And I said, "Okay." And I was working as a music producer for an ad agency in London at the time, and he brought it down, and he didn't have a case for it, so it was in a cereal box. And I needed somewhere to check it worked, so I went to the nearest place, which was the stairwell of the ad agency, and I had some headphones. There was ad execs and creatives walking past me whilst I was playing with this 303, looking like an absolute weirdo. And it all worked, all good. The guy was a really nice guy. Turned out he was an old school raver who'd had it since back in the day. And I gave him an envelope of cash, and he gave me a cereal box of 303. And that is where my 303 comes from. We've cleaned it up. I've added MIDI to it. Everything's nice and working. So again, I feel like a bit of a custodian over an original 303. So there we go. Those are my Roland stories. I would love to hear yours. Please put them in the comments section. I'm sure they're more interesting than mine. Happy birthday to Roland, and thank you to them for sponsoring this video. Thank you to Bjux, and thank you to you for watching.